What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Wednesday night, and I know a lot of you guys are curled up in bed right now, scrolling through your rosters, making moves, so we're dropping a trade target video right on your head top. We have my must buy and sell trade targets for week 9 of the fantasy football season. We have a few buys, a few sells, some for 6-2 teams that are really far out ahead, some teams that are in desperation mode. We got trade targets for all shapes and sizes. We have a lot to get into, so make sure you get on below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
VVS stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, I think a lot of you guys that are subscribed to the channel, watch all my videos, you're like, Ron, what the hell is going on? What's on your face? Well, we have a mustache going. We're doing a little Movember fundraiser. We did it last year, and I had some fun with it, but for every 1,000 views we get on the channel, I'll be donating $1 towards the Movember Foundation. It goes towards men's mental health, suicide prevention, I think prostate cancer prevention, testicular cancer prevention, all that stuff. This is a channel. Some people complain. I say, what's going on, man? The reality of the situation is like 99.6% of you guys are men. So I do think it's one of those things where I don't really use my platform for much, but I think that this is an important cause to me. I think a lot of you guys out there are probably young, watching these videos, and there's stigmas around men's mental health, all of that stuff. I think it's one of those things that I think should be loud and proud. I myself see a therapist from time to time, whether it's for personal issues or just as a business owner. A lot of things I run here as a one-man employee. It's good to have someone or an outlet to blow off steam, work through your problems with. It's a good resource to have across the board. Now, we'll have timestamps, or it doesn't really make sense for me to talk about it now. I was going to say we'll have timestamps, so if you just want to get to the football, you can skip ahead. But starting up here with our trade targets for week 9 of the fantasy football season, our first buy here is somebody that was a sell for us early in the season, DK Metcalf. Now, that was because he was overperforming his volume, and now he's doing the opposite. He sits at wide receiver 20 expected points per game. Expected points per game is just simply your ADOT, your targets, how many points per game should you be putting up? He should be a back-end wide receiver 2. Instead, he's wide receiver 28 in points per game. He's like a mid wide receiver 3, which I think is when it's time to sort of swoop in and buy him. And if we look at just his last 2 games, which would be the last 4 weeks, he was hurt, he was on a bye, but just recently he's had a huge volume uptick to the point where he used to be a guy that was in like wide receiver 40s in expected points per game and was like a top 24 wide receiver outperforming his volume. The things have kind of turned here, or the pendulum has kind of swung here, and I think that's when you sort of swoop in, buy, and things will sort of even out as he just gives you like a wide receiver 2-year rest of the season. This is actually a great visualization from Hayden Winks. He does a usage report every single week, underdognetwork.com, I believe. It's really good. How all this stuff is free that he just puts out here, and he just churns these out. It's amazing. But you can see this is since week 5. On PFF, he's the wide receiver 3 in expected points per game. I'm not sure what it is here, but the x-axis is expected half PPR points per game. The y-axis is actual half PPR points per game. Expected half PPR across the bottom, actual across the top. So you can see he's not scoring many points, but he's in this area of this like underperforming where he is like on an island all by himself. But he's in this range where literally it's Jamar Chase, it's Thielen, and then it's him in expected half point PPR points per game. If you just go from like 20 expected half PPR points and sort of move towards Metcalf. So he's in a spot where he should bounce back. He's had 23 targets in his last 2 games. The Seahawks are clearly trying to feature him despite him like coming off of injury a few weeks ago. They're also an offense that are 9th in pass rate over expectation. They want to pass the ball. They're featuring DK Metcalf. I think now is a good time to sweep in if the guy who has him isn't valuing him as he should. Now, when we look at sort of potential trade targets for DK Metcalf, we have Fantasy Calc, which is what we'll be looking at for every single one of these, but they essentially, we can see here, fantasy football rankings automatically generated from 2 million trades or whatever in real fantasy football leagues. So they like go into real fantasy football leagues, they scrape all of that stuff with their API, and it gives us a trade database of real trades that are happening in real life. Now, is it perfect? No. There's some silly trades that come up here, but we limit it to 1-for-1s or 1-for-2s, 1 QB, 12-teamer, half and full PPR. We pick out some of the ones that look pretty nice. So what can you buy DK Metcalf for on the open market? If you can do James Cook for DK Metcalf, I would do that all day long. If you could do, I don't know, if you're in a spot where you can offload to Trevor Lawrence and somebody's that desperate, sure, go ahead. Isaiah Pacheco for DK Metcalf. I think that that's actually very much doable. If I was in a spot where like Pacheco was like a flex for me and he's not in my RB1 or RB2 spot, I'd be fine with that. If you can somehow, I mean, not to junk off for Jalen Warren and Brandon Cooks, but if you can do something in this range, if you could do like Jalen Warren and Courtland Sutton for DK Metcalf, I would. I would do Najee for Metcalf straight up if that's on the table. Deontay Johnson for Metcalf, I don't think would be. Gus Edwards, I don't think you can do Gus Edwards alone, but if you could do like Gus Edwards in a small little piece, like if you could do Gus Edwards and Romeo Doubs for Metcalf, I would. But you guys sort of get the point. You can sort of go on here and mess around with it yourself. Christian Watson and Dameon Pierce does feel a little bit steep, but again, I do like the idea of using like Courtland Sutton or like a James Cook in a piece to go get yourself. Gus Edwards and Michael Thomas is actually sweet. That's actually absolutely perfect for what I would be trying to do to get to DK Metcalf. Now, our next buy candidate is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor was a guy I wanted to put on here a couple weeks ago, but I didn't want to have him 2 times in a row. He had like a pretty tough slate of games here where he was going up against the Saints and then the Browns, or the Browns and the Saints. He's coming off a game versus the Saints that I didn't really have high expectations for. The Saints have been a great defense this year with a good defensive line. They're good against the run. And Jonathan Taylor, I guess you could call it underperformed. He underperformed, and for that reason, on Fantasy Calc, the site that we just saw, he is one of the biggest fallers on the entire site, which means that sends off signals to me it's time to buy. Because this feels like one of the last times you can buy low on Jonathan Taylor until his rocket ship just kind of takes off here. We have a lot of fraudulent running backs at the top. You have like Pollard, you have Josh Jacobs. Everyone's sort of propped up by volume. I think Taylor's one of the few guys that kind of get pushed up to that next level where he's actually talented. Kind of like a Travis Etienne, where Etienne's not necessarily leading the league in volume, but he's actually breaking off long plays, getting touchdowns like Breece Hall as well. I'd put Jonathan Taylor in there as well here. Now, he came off a game versus the Browns, who have a historic defense. He put up 20-plus PPR points versus that team. How the sentiment on him is now down to like RB13, I couldn't really tell you. So he's coming off a little bit of a hiccup versus Saints defense. And I think some people are scared off that maybe they think he was hurt. This is a tweet from Kyle Dvorchak here. Matthew Betts made the original tweet, pretty much saying that JT, he pretty much like came up sort of hobbling, and then he had just 1 touch in the second half. Now, Jonathan Taylor came into the year off an injury. Jonathan Taylor did kind of look like he tweaked something in this game, but Kyle sort of points out here, through this play, Jonathan Taylor had a 63% snap share with 11 of 19 team carries and 12 routes to Zach Moss's 8. Now, on those 11 carries, he had 94 yards versus the Saints defense. He was cooking. 11 for 94 at half is beautiful. Like, he was on pace to get a 100 rushing yard game. And then he said after this play, Taylor had a 66% snap share with 1 of 6 team carries and 16 routes to Moss's 5. So there were only 6 carries to go around the rest of the half because the Colts were in comeback mode and like a really wonky game script versus a good defense in the Saints. 1 of 6 carries, that's not great, but I don't think that's going to stick moving forward again. He was at 11 of 19 in the first half, and him running 16 routes to Moss's 5 is actually amazing. Like, he is, I mean, I'm not going to call him the preferred pass catcher, but he had 12 routes to Moss's 8 in the first half, and then he had, 16 to Moss's 5 in the second half. So if he is the featured back and then also the leaned-on pass-catching back, that's amazing. And now he gets teed up in a perfect bounce-back spot here. We've gotten no news on this injury. It seems like he's just fine. It seems like he's going to come into this next game. He's going to be just fine. They have the Panthers here. The Panthers are allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs, which is the perfect spot for JT to have a massive bounce back and then kind of run off into the sunset as a guy that you can no longer buy, right? When the buy window kind of shuts. And I think that we're right on the precipice of that. So if you can go and buy Jonathan Taylor, I think you should. Now, when we talk about like what we're buying Jonathan Taylor for, we go to fantasycalc.com here. Dameon Pierce, like a wide receiver piece, like a Michael Thomas, I think I would. I don't know that somebody would do that. I'm trying to think of like a better wide receiver than Michael Thomas. I would do Pierce and like Nico Collins. I like this Javonte and Nico Collins deal. I would do that for Jonathan Taylor. I would also do James Cook and Calvin Ridley is very close. If I could do somebody just like a tier below, if I could do like James Cook and Marquise Brown for Jonathan Taylor, I would do something like that. I think I would even still pay James Cook and Calvin Ridley, but that's like about the highest. Dameon Pierce and Amari Cooper, I would as well. If you can do a 2-for-1 with a running back in this Dameon Pierce range, a wide receiver kind of in this no man's land of Amari Cooper, I definitely would. Rachaad White and Terry McLaurin, another one I would do for Jonathan Taylor. Now, going up to our third must-buy trade target here, we have Cooper Kupp. Now, Cooper Kupp, to me, is a perfect luxury buy. If you're 6-2, you're 7-1, you're 8-0, I would, tap on the Cooper Kupp owner's shoulder, see how he's doing. He's somebody that, didn't have Cooper Kupp for the first 4 to 5 weeks. he could be down bad. And if he's down bad, I think that you sort of approach him. You see what you can do here, because this is still the Cooper Kupp we know. He is not dead. He has not fallen off a cliff. He has come into, since coming off of his hamstring injury, 12 targets, 9 targets, 7, then 10. He had 2 straight 100-yard games coming off of injury. Then he had a wonky game where he had 7 targets, just 2 catches. That never happens for Cooper Kupp. And then the next game, Stafford gets hurt. Now, the sentiment around the Rams is the sky is falling. It's in the same category as Kirk Cousins. And that's where I was at initially. I was like, man, Stafford's going to go on IR, and this thing's going to be an absolute shit show. Well, Stafford dodged IR. And then not only dodged IR, but Deepak Chona here, an injury analyst on Twitter, said he has a chance to play in Week 9. Stafford might play as early as Week 9, and if not, he could sit Week 9. They have a bye Week 10, and then he comes back Week 11. So this, again, a luxury buy because you buy Kupp. He's probably a wide receiver 2 this week if Stafford doesn't play. That's just kind of a volume wide receiver 2. Gets healthy during the bye. Stafford gets healthy during the bye. They come out the other side, and then boom, you have a top 5 wide receiver rest of season. I think that is the perfect scenario. Again, him dodging the IR is amazing, and I think that the sentiment around Kupp is about as low as it's going to be this season. Again, similar to a Jonathan Taylor. Now, when we look at what we could sort of buy Cooper Kupp for, it's really nothing. It's not all that expensive. Now, if we could sort of try and find something that's in that range, if I could do Alvin Kamara for Cooper Kupp and a running back, I wouldn't want Brian Robinson, but if I could do, I don't know, if I could do something in if I could do Kupp and Achane, something like that, that might be a team like that where they have Kupp and Achane and they're really down bad. I would love a deal like that. I'm trying to think of somebody else, if there's a Mixon, Kupp and Mixon for Kamara. Again, we're trying to buy a little bit low when it comes to Kupp. Again, Javonte and McLaurin, I would do that all day. Olave and Downs, I actually would. I would add to my Olave. I would add to my Devontae Smith. I would add to my Terry McLaurins of the world. Puka Nacua and Nico Collins is interesting. I think I would do that as well. Puka Nacua I'll add as a little small buy as well for all the same reasons as Kupp. He's somebody as well. If you have him, don't panic. Don't sell him. Deontay and Raheem Mostert, I would do that as well with Devin Achane coming back. Deontay Johnson showing some life here. And I don't even think that either of these guys are necessarily firm must-sells. Josh Jacobs and a piece to go get Kupp, I would actually like that myself. Raheem Mostert, again, and a small piece to get Kupp. I would do that. But again, I think you can get him from pretty cheap, man. I think people are going to be valuing him as a fringe wide receiver 1 at this point in the year. Now, our next buy after Cooper Kupp is going to be Christian Watson here. Now, this is just more, I don't want to call it lowballing, but see if you can just sort of get him for very cheap. I think that the sentiment around the Packers right now is awful. Sentiment around Christian Watson right now is awful. And Christian Watson is one of these guys where he's kind of I would call him a budget DK Metcalf, where DK Metcalf, we just talked about him, he's underperforming his volume. That's what we're seeing with Christian Watson. And that's even with, Christian Watson is wide receiver 31 in expected points per game. Shout out to PFF for this data here. But we can see 13.4 expected points per game in this area of, you can see Ayuk, Zay Flowers, Michael Thomas, Lockett, Calvin Ridley, T. Higgins, George Pickens, Nico Collins. That's fine volume. He's just underperforming by a ton. Minus 4.8. It's the least on this entire screenshot. So he's really underperforming that. And that's wide receiver 31 in volume, despite leaving some games early with injury and just sort of having some wonky things like that happen. So the volume has very much been there. I think things are going to bounce back. He showed last year that he's a good player. And if you can sort of scoop in and buy him low, I would. Now, I know the sentiment, again, Packers suck, Jordan Love sucks. And sure, Jordan Love isn't great, but he's not a god-awful quarterback. This is a quarterback efficiency chart from Kevin Cole on Twitter. Has PFF offensive grade and has EPA per play, which EPA per play is just per play efficiency. PFF offensive grade, I guess, is more of a film grade. You can see Jordan Love is positive EPA per play and a fine PFF offensive grade. So if you trust Derek Carr enough to support Chris Olave, if you support Sam Howell enough to support Terry McLaurin, if you trust Kenny Pickett to support your George Pickens and your Deontay Johnson, Jordan Love is right in that area. There's also enough volume to go around in this offense where you can see this isn't some wide receiver group that's getting no volume. This is, again, a Hayden Wings chart showing wide receiver usage across their entire wide receiver room. And you can see in usage since week 5, the Packers are middle of the pack, right? They're not down towards the bottom in that Browns, Jets, Falcons, Bears area of teams that just have super low volume across the board. There is volume for the taking at wide receiver on this offense. Jordan Love isn't bad as his last performance. Again, we've seen so many up and downs with quarterbacks, man. We saw, oh, well, Kirk Cousins, he's awful. They're 1-4 right now, and then he comes out. Or what game did they lose? I'm trying to remember. They lost a really bad game. It wasn't versus the Texans, but maybe it was the Panthers, but they lost a really bad game at home to somebody. Then it might have been the Bears. So then they come out and they rip off a bunch of games. Like, things happen in the NFL. A few weeks ago, it looked like Sam Howell was awful. Now he's like in good graces. Quarterback play goes up and down. Purdy was an absolute monster through the first 6 weeks. I'm down to bet on Jordan Love to bounce back a bit. He's shown some physical tools. He can push the ball downfield. So for that reason, I like betting on Christian Watson. Again, you can buy him for very, very cheap here. We'll look at sort of what you can buy him for in the trade database on Fantasy Calc. And we're talking Jordan Love straight up. I don't think you can do that, but like pure strong. Maybe you could do something like a Kareem Hunt straight up. Romeo Doubs for Christian Watson straight up, I would. Jalen Warren for Christian Watson straight up, I think I would. If I already had if I have Trey McBride and Cole Kmet, I don't mind sending Cole Kmet for Christian Watson. Sam Howell for Christian Watson, I don't know how that's a thing. Zach Moss for Christian Watson, I would. Zeke Elliott for Christian Watson, I would. We said Kareem Hunt, but yes, I would do that as well. Dalton Schultz, like, if you can do like Odell Beckham and like, I don't know, like junk. If you could do Odell Beckham and like Ezekiel Elliott and get Christian Watson, again, he's literally free 99 right now. I'm not telling you to throw junk at Christian Watson, but just see what you can get when it comes to Christian Watson. Now, before we get into our must-sell trade targets here, I have a very, very important announcement. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy. This is actually very, very cool, guys. We have our very own Underdog Partner Special. Jets have a Monday Night Football game. They're playing versus the Chargers, which means we have an Underdog Special just for the Ron Stewart YouTube channel community here, where if you have used my promo code in the past, or if you use my promo code in the future, promo code Ron, get you a deposit match to $500 on Underdog Fantasy. I'll have a link in the description in the comment section down below. Click it. It'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. It'll use my promo code Ron. It'll match your deposit up to $500. And then you will also get a special pick'em here over Garrett Wilson, 0.5 total yards. All you have to do is get a single yard, and you pretty much get a free space for your pick'em slip, where you can pretty much go higher or lower, string them together. I think if you get like 4 correct, you get like a 10x on your pick'em slip. It's a great way to just kind of go higher or lower, receiving yards, rushing yards, fantasy points. It's a fun way to have a nice little sweat for that Monday night game. So you can actually string that together with pick'ems for the Thursday night game, Sunday game, all of that good stuff, but something that is only for people who use promo code Ron. So again, if you've used it in the past, or if you're going to use it now or in the future, that is going to be pretty much viable all the way through Monday night. So that's a very cool thing from Underdog. Again, as always, shout out to them. They are the best. I feel very special that they're allowing me and my community to do this. Now, moving on from that, we have our must-sell trade targets here. First up, we have Rachaad White. Rachaad White's been on here a few times, and this is what it comes down to. All right, it's been our philosophy going into the draft season. It's been our philosophy in fantasy football for the last few years. I don't like these middling running backs. I don't like these dead zone running backs, these like RB2s, because we see on a weekly basis, you can match that production with your Darrell Hendersons, your Gus Edwards, your Amari DiMercados. The list goes on and on. You can, week in and week out, just kind of mimic this production off of waiver wires. We got Kyron Williams early in the season, was an absolute madman. You had Raheem Mostert was damn near free in every single draft. You're going to get spots here coming up where you can just pick up a running back off of waivers, and he's going to be someone that can just start in your lineup right away. A lot of these cheap guys, Kareem Hunt as well, Chuba Hubbard. I would rather string together my running back points that way and, ship off these RB2s to either upgrade, take Rachaad White in a piece and go get a Jonathan Taylor, or take Rachaad White in a piece and go get a wide receiver so that you can, upgrade your flex with a sick wide receiver and then just put waiver wire, low-end RB2s into your RB2 spot, because Rachaad White just isn't really helping your team. It's really just more certainty of, okay, this guy's going to get volume and give me RB2 numbers every week. That's not actually moving the needle, because I can just match that production with my Darrell Hendersons of the world off of waivers. So it's not really helping your team a ton. Now, he is the RB20 in points per game. He's the RB17 in expected points per game. So again, we're talking mid-range, back-end RB2 here. Something off 2 of his biggest games of the year where he had, 15 points and then 17 points. Both of those games, he wasn't all that efficient. He just kind of got a bunch of targets, which is fine, but there's not a huge ceiling there. And I would just rather, again, upgrade to JT, Gibbs, Breece Hall, Bijan. These guys with like actual ceilings here. And on top of that, he does have a fine, like a neutral matchup versus Houston this week, though Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders both struggled versus them. Then he has Tennessee, then San Fran. So that's a pretty brutal row of running backs where he could then drop down into your high-end RB3 range of rest of season rankings. So again, I would just be looking to move on off of him personally. So when we look at what we can kind of get for him on Fantasy Calc here, again, I'm looking to kind of do a little 2-for-1. You add to Rachaad White, you take a piece, and you go get an upgrade. So is there any that we can kind of see here on Fantasy Calc? Rachaad White and Zay Flowers go get Devontae Adams. I absolutely love that. Rachaad White and DJ Moore to go get Breece Hall. That is about as much as I would pay for Breece Hall, but I actually love that. Like Rachaad White and a wide receiver in this DJ Moore range, Nico Collins range, something, Michael Pittman and go get Breece Hall, go get Jonathan Taylor. Yes, all day long. Derrick Henry's not my cup of tea, but if he is, I mean, he could maybe do something like this. What else stands out? Yeah, Rachaad White and Terry McLaurin for Jonathan Taylor. That is perfect. Rachaad White and Deontay Johnson somehow gets you Bijan Robinson. So anything in that range, Rachaad White and Amari Cooper for Devontae Adams. Again, add to Rachaad White, upgrade at wide receiver, running back, tight end, whatever. If you want to do Rachaad White and Trey McBride and go get Sam Laporta, maybe that's something that can be attainable there. So again, I would again just use him 2-for-1, especially right now when we're sort of looking towards the playoffs, trying to bolster our starting lineup. Those are the deals I would be looking to make. Now, our last player we're going to talk about today is Courtland Sutton. And we've talked about him before as a must-sell, but he just continues to run hot, man. He scored another touchdown. I know he's on bye, but I feel like there's a lot of upwards momentum on the Broncos. They win. They beat the Chiefs. Nobody got traded. They're riding high into the bye week. Courtland Sutton just scored a touchdown. He is now the wide receiver 26 in points per game with 13.4. But here's the issue. He is the wide receiver 26 in points per game, but he's the wide receiver 55 in expected points per game. And if we look here, you can go the receiving, and that XTD column is expected touchdowns. He's expected for 3.4 touchdowns this year. He has 6. He is almost doubling his expected touchdown output. That is insane. Like, that is insane production on a team that's not that good. So that is the moment where I'd be looking to sell, where, again, he's running hot on touchdowns. He's like a wide receiver 50 in volume. If you can sell him for a wide receiver 3 price, I absolutely would. Now, if you want to hold him coming off the bye and then sell him after the bye, I think that's also completely viable. But I would at least kick the tires and see if anybody will pay for Courtland Sutton. Because, again, I think there's a lot of positive vibes around him, and players are on bye. I don't think that you can't sell a player who's on bye. Now, if we look at trades that have been completed for him recently, you have some decent stuff here. Gus Edwards and Courtland Sutton for Debo. I don't hate that. I don't love Debo as a buy candidate, though, right now. Just coming off of injury, there's a lot of uncertainty there. Courtland Sutton and Logan Thomas. You can do Courtland Sutton in a piece to go to DK Metcalf. Do that all day long. If you can do Courtland Sutton, I don't mind Courtland Sutton in a piece to go get T. Higgins, but I wouldn't do Aaron Jones. Courtland Sutton. Anything else stand out here? Courtland Sutton for Zay Flowers. I do that all day long. Courtland Sutton. Is there anything else from a few days ago here? Courtland Sutton for Fournette. No, I'm chilling on that. Courtland Sutton for Aaron Jones. If that's out there, I would. Courtland Sutton in a piece who would get Devontae. Obviously, Josh Downs wouldn't do it, but somebody in that, Marquise Brown, Jacoby Myers, Amari Cooper area might get you there. Courtland Sutton for Amari Cooper straight up. Yes, please. Like any of these guys who aren't performing right now, I don't hate it. Courtland Sutton and Curtis Samuel for Amari Cooper. I don't hate that either. Courtland Sutton and Gus Edwards for George Pickens. I think I actually would. Even though this says that you're losing that trade, I don't mind it too much. I do love this one, Sutton and Olave to go get Kenneth Walker. If you want to add Sutton to your Olave, I don't think Olave is even necessarily a sell, but if you can do that and then go get like a truly elite asset like a Walker, a Jonathan Taylor, a Breece, a JT, or we already said Jonathan Taylor, but Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, something like that, I would like a deal in that range. Now that is going to do it for us today. Again, make sure you go check it out. It is really cool that Underdog has allowed us to do this as a community here. Again, promo code Ron gets you a deposit matched up to $500 on Underdog Fantasy. I'll have a link in the description, comment section down below. It'll use my promo code Ron. It'll match your first deposit up to $500. And then from there, you can do fantasy drafts, and then you can do pick'ems. Where pick'ems, again, you string together higher or lowers on receiving yards, touchdowns, passing yards, whatever you want. And for everyone you get right, there's a multiplier there. Pick'em slips, I'm sure you've seen them across the board everywhere. If you have used my promo code in the past, or if you have now used my promo code after watching this video, you get access to an exclusive special. This is not on the rest of the site. This is just for you guys that use promo code Ron. You get a Garrett Wilson special. If he goes over that 0.5 total yards, you get a free square pretty much in your pick'em slip. It is really cool that they are doing this again. But if you're not on a state that has pick'em, or you're already on Underdog Fantasy, I appreciate your support regardless. Make sure you subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around